my early mixing experiences, my first mixing experiences were due to my older brother, who was a drummer, professional drummer, and got drawn into recording the band that he played with and making a demo with them, and then friends found out and he recorded that band and so on, and then it grew and the recording thing took over to a degree, and my dad saw this as an opportunity to help his oldest child, my oldest brother, and so and the studio came out of that. There was a space we used at the house that was for that, and then when Paul, my oldest brother, wanted to record his drums, he needed someone to push the buttons, and so I got drawn in as a 12-year-old or 13-year-old, and I loved it. And then all of my time outside of school, I'd be doing sport and things, but I'd also be in the studio learning how things worked and intrigued by the equipment and what a compressor did and how it did it, and gates and old school bits of equipment. And this was the late 70s, so there was no digital equipment then. It was all analog equipment, and I loved it. I didn't have to be forced to go in there. I ran down there after school to further my knowledge of the equipment and try and just learn about it. I loved it. Breakthrough moments, I think my career has been split into two different sections. The studio section up to, which is what I did predominantly up to about 2000, from when I left high school in the 80s. Mainly at my brother's place and then all over at various different studios, including Eastcote, which is where we are today. There wasn't really particular artists in my studio career, if you like, which is still going. I still do studio type stuff occasionally. I have a little room at home, but it was more about a couple of labels that I worked for where I did all of their recording, one through the 80s and one through the 90s, Jam Today Records and then Intimate Records, which are London-based British R&B labels, both of them really, or dancey R&B labels. And I did an awful lot of work with their artists and learned an awful lot on their time, if you like. They were fronting the ability for me to sit with a bunch of guys and investigate different techniques and try and all crazy things and some not so crazy. In terms of live, the thing that got me into it in the first place, the ability to do a live show, I think that has to be considered a breakthrough, really, which is a friend of mine, a producer called Philip Tennant, who I'd worked with in recording studios, with him producing, and then he was at that point managing a band called the Waterboys, and he asked me if I would do some edits on an album they just recorded in 2000, and with Mike Scott from the Waterboys, which I did, and Mike and I got on very well, and then they asked me to go on tour with them, and I'd never toured in my life before in those terms, and it fitted. I got on great with it. I loved it, and I went as the monitor engineer initially, which was fantastic. Looking back, it was the best thing that could have happened. And then another major stepping stone, if you like, was in 2006 or 6 was the first thing. I was asked to do some shows with Joe Cocker. Then he toured the following year, and the guy that had been with him and had been doing it for quite a long time, Bruce Jones, wasn't available. He was doing something else. I can't remember what he was doing now, but he wasn't available. And quite late on, I was asked to go and do that whole world tour, Hymn for My Soul tour, which suddenly you're in a different area of the business. Suddenly we're not doing a few European festivals and maybe a month around the UK and Northern Europe. Suddenly we're doing 3 months in each territory and private planes, and it's just a bit bigger. So in terms of advice for younger and up-and-coming people, I find it very difficult to point them in a certain direction. And I do get contacted and speak to younger people about this. I've done presentations at schools and universities and colleges, and it's something that comes up all the time. And within the digital age as it's become very difficult to get young people behind a console with someone experienced looking after them.